This is a continuum of a conversation about the necessity and problems with monuments in the city of Chicago, this nation, and the world. This episode will also include an arrangement of a sound monument dedicated to the love story that is the city of Chicago. This is Breaking Bread. Going to question number 3, what it is to make a monument and what make monuments problematic has a lot to do with this conversation that people are having all over the world about monuments and what makes them problematic. I know that when I first came along or came on board with the Floating Museum, the exhibition was how to build a mountain, right? And that's when that question even came up. That was been struck with me. How are these mountains or these monuments built? And I could like to think about having Janae, Jeremiah, or Fahim chime in into this question, and then when we move into what makes them problematic, and have Jesse and Starla or Coco, speak to that particular one. And like I said, when we move into the 4th question, since Kushla is the artist that we're working with the South Asian Institute, just kind of have you be a bit more transparent about what you're asking yourself in this process of building a monument. All right.
Maybe me and Jeremiah can tag team a little bit, if I'm not mistaken. That was the order. Yeah, I think right now, fortuitous. It's fortuitous. We've been thinking about monuments and drawing attention to people. You spoke a little bit about how we started with kind of a scan of an object as a way, and the scaling of that object as a way of drawing attention to a history that we felt wasn't talked about, right? It's this way of kind of drawing attention to a plot of land that was a commemorative park that could also, for Jean-Paul Baptiste du Sable, which could also be considered a monument. It's kind of a form of acknowledgement, right? Commemorative park. And then, through thinking about platform building, then it turned out, we learned another aspect of that history. So the history began to build on itself. And then there's a way to kind of think about, now, in order to really pay honor to Jean-Paul Baptiste du Sable, we need to actually honor his family. We need to honor his tribe. We need to honor all aspects of his being. So I think, we were, in some sort of way thinking about this before Columbus statues started getting yanked down, before, flags started getting ripped off poles. Like just shortly before, like a year before, we had a little bit of time to think about that. And now we're kind of full steam. The city has drawn attention. The city has moved its eyes towards, once again, rethinking how we honor, who gets to be honored, who gets to do the honoring. So all these things are coming together, and it's just like, this is honoring. Like, this gathering is honoring. This is a form of a monument. It's a form of a memorial. It's a way of calling people's names out. And the more we do that, the more we honor. The more we spread it to our children and our neighbors, our community. The more we build together. That's how we honor. So I enjoy making, or being a part of making, these large monuments, these large objects that move around, because I am an art maker. But at the same time, I think I see that as a byproduct of the community building. That's where my real joy is learning and challenging the things that I know as a way of growing, and then building on that as well. So, that's, when we think about truth telling, the truth evolves. It grows as you get more information. And I said this the other day. Don't have me looking stupid, Starlet. Kushla, don't have me out here in the world repeating stuff. If I say it wrong, say the name wrong, don't say it right, pull me to the side and say, hey, you kind of sound crazy. You need to, So I want to build a space where we feel okay to kind of correct each other or nudge each other in the right direction and not take offense in it, because it's all in service of truth. It's all in service of growth as well. So, but you got to build trust to be able to feel comfortable enough to do that. It's a process. It's not a end game. Jeremiah, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, no, for some reason when I walk around public space and see bronze monuments, I always have this idea that it's almost like we're walking around with these icebergs, and it's like the ocean, and we're seeing like these monuments in the tip of some huge underground subterranean power system that these little icebergs sort of represent above ground. And just thinking about sort of monuments as a way to do counter monuments, really to have conversation. I think that sort of conversations are much more powerful than these static bronze objects. And Starla, actually, when we did the first translator, I was just we were thinking about like fabric as being a counterpoint. Instead of making a bronze statue, what if it could be fabric and it could be blown up and moved around, and that could be a counterpoint, right? And to push on that word founders, what if there were 4 faces instead of 1 on a horse, but when the performance happened, I think, for me, it really clicked in this idea of like improv, like, oh my God, maybe the monument could be improv, and maybe it could be really messy. And like, what happens when something's translated? And then that got me thinking, Avery, back to language, and like what happens when language is translated into other languages and multiplicity can happen. So anyway, I think that's a little bit of our thinking around monuments. But I'm actually really excited also just to make space and move aside. And I think some of that is really, that gets me excited just in terms of Floyd Museum's work in regards to like making more seats at the table as we're moving forward with the work.
Yeah, I mean, and just to also chime in, I think the important thing that I've learned in this process is the idea of the story. Like a lot of time, or as much of the story as possible, right? When we think about monuments, they're dedicated or named after specific people, but those people come with journeys, and they also represent journeys and stories and narratives. And a lot of the time, that what makes it problematic is the narrative and the journey that person has, right? Like, yeah, somebody want to make a statue because, and in this level of the narrative, you're this founder of the country, but you was a slave owner to somebody else, and that makes it problematic. Columbus, really? we really about keep telling these people. I really keep telling these people this lie every year, all the time. This is what we go. And also, what does that mean that you discovered this? I never forget being in 4th grade, and I was raised by hand. It was right around October, and we was talking about Christopher Columbus or Cristobal Colon, right? Like the name, like the real name, right? That I had to learn, right? I was raised by hand. I was like, well, hey, look, how do you discover some shit and the people are already there? And the teacher was like, this dude gets on my nerves. This dude right here, he need to hurry up and graduate to become where the fuck he gonna be in life. Because this one right here gets on my nerves. And she was just like, look, it's a European discovery. Well, what makes a European discovery any more important than people who had already been here, or people who have already, or the people who already were? That like that person discovered the situation. That one, whoever stumbled upon it, and she was like, "Well, look here, Avery. This is how we're gonna do this." On Friday's test, when the question is who discovered America, if you put any other name, then this is how she explains it. Christopher Columbus. I want to mark it wrong. You want 100 on your test? I said, I'm gonna get 100 on my test, but the shit still ain't right. You wrong. Let it just be known. You wrong. And you wrong for teaching me wrong. So that when I think about this process and this work that we do, and I always think about monuments, or when we think about building monuments, the idea of the story and the journey this thing carries, even though it's just an object that a lot of times is for us to honor some level of history and narrative, and those histories and narratives are just really deep. And I just like to say in our work as we are constantly in conversation and questioning how we do this, because again, 20, 40, 50 years from now, somebody could say, but this is problematic because of this and this. And so a lot of what we're doing is really asking a lot of questions.
Okay, Coco raised her hand. Go ahead, Coco.
Janae, and I just wanted to make sure that we had Janae in this conversation to the next situation. And
y'all can chime in too. Like, don't feel like we have to. You can just pop in.
Okay. So is the question on the table is how do you create something that is living, like a living monument, but it's not in the traditional sense that involves this moment that we're creating, that also informs whoever is looking at it, seeing it, touching it, who we are?
So the question is, how do we build monuments? And that could also be now in this new conversation, right? Living monuments as opposed to these statues or these things that gotta look like a person, or could they be these things that could be more abstract? Could they be these things that are not physical? Or what makes that monument and whatever material or representation problematic? Or what could make it?
And I think, Coco, also, I started us out on that journey. I kind of merged the questions a little bit, like thinking about the utility of monuments, in that monuments are often used for quote unquote truth telling and honoring a certain truth. So I kind of merged Avery's questions together in my response, which is what Jeremiah also kind of built on. So that's it was a merge of it. So I guess in some sort of ways, the notion of truth telling, and how do you think about, or we, whoever, think about monuments now, and how you pay homage, maybe, in a way. I don't know.
What came to mind was this I think of the quilt, and I think of a quilt with these patches, and these patches, like this is a patch, we're looking at a quilt right here, and somehow printing, who are we at this time? So the fabric that we use is going to be very, very specific for this time. The colors that are used to make fabric, the materials, like chartreuse was big time in the 70s. Nobody's really, it's kind of coming back into fashion. But when you look at colors and you look at fabrics and you look at fonts and you look at all the technology and the handmade things that came into that, it's giving context to the time, to the people, where they're from, the Robinism and Coco, the West Side and Avery, India and Kushla, did I say your country right?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure I didn't get nobody mixed up. The way my ADHD is set up, things kind of go. But to me, like, that would be beautiful, and it can build upon, and it can grow, and you can put a time. This was 2019 to 2022 that we were honoring them at this time, and then it's gonna look different. What does the outline look like? What are the patches? Is it patch from Avery's blue jeans that he loves so much? Is it Coco's shirt that she won't throw away? You know, that she decided to put something and sew something on and embellish it? I don't know. I just want to share that.
You know,
I think that, yeah, go ahead.
I would say, Fahim, on your comment about having a safe space, and I tell people that all the time. I don't translate. I didn't learn that I was not speaking whatever tongue you're speaking until I came to the United States.
Mhm.
Then I was, oh, you're speaking Spanish. Oh, you're speaking Portuguese. I just knew if by him opened his mouth and said things, I either comprehend the word or the movement or the feeling. And then I mimic and or answer, right? And I will tell you, Wells High School, as any of you, like my worst American experience, right? Because it was like, idiot, you got to stick to one language. And I'm like, no, I'm hearing Spanish. I'm hearing, I'm hearing it. I hear it, right? And so my head's gonna turn. And if you're communicating with me, not just speaking, but if you communicate, I will commute, right? I will participate in that, right? And so it's not just about correct me and in truth correct me. It's also being brave enough to say, hey, Janae, we don't say, I forgot the word I just said. I said wrong, prideful. We say to be proud, right? But the translation in my head was translating. What did I, how do I do that? I don't necessarily, and Brian will tell you, when I get really passionate and excited, y'all want to say the thing I said, right? Because it may come out in 4 or 5 different languages. But those who know me will stop me and say, okay, slow down, right? And here's how we said it. So one quick story and then a definition. The word niggardly. Never had a color to it. I understood the word niggardly.
Niggardly, yeah, that's the word, yeah.
Never had a color. It was about a character being. It was no different than the word arcade, right?
Right.
But Janae got arrested in Congress because Rahm Emanuel asked me to talk about affordable housing. And my sentence was, this niggard way of thinking, then I heard everybody stop breathing. Sergeant at Arms come to me to arrest me for an English effing word that you put out there. And so for me, I go back to saying, words have meaning. Yes, my first mugshot was the, DC Capitol Police. And then they had to bring me back and apologize because it is in the dictionary. And they ain't got a black face in front of it, right? And then had to let me finish, period, right? And had to let me finish my sentence. So I wanna, and for me, when I'm trying to understand big concepts, or complex concept, I gotta go back to Latin because that's the basis of how my mother taught us. And so in Latin, monere is where the word monument comes from. And monere means what? To remember and or to be advised. Hear me, folks. To remember and or to be advised, even to be warned. So y'all, I get it. The Confederate flag might mean something to you badly, but I like the warning that it is. I am now able to tell my children, look at that flag. Here's the story behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we go see Christophe Colon's I explain to those that want to hear me why you should know this story. So I have an odd sense about the whole idea of monuments, because it is us as people that decide it is about homage. But if we're gonna go to what it is, it's really about remembering and being reminded over and over, generation after generation after generation. So there are some monuments that I need to stay in existence with the story. This is where we lose our moment, right? Is that the story and who's telling the story is distorted, right? Like for you, Avery, in school, right? And so that's the space that I've been in. So, you know, I was interviewed. I didn't know I was being interviewed to be part of that monuments table that the mayor's office did. And my pretty book.
You didn't pass on that one, huh? You jumped right in the middle of that. I was like, yeah, I'm not available. Like you jumped right into it.
Well, they were like, oh, that's what you think. I said, yeah, that's what I think. And they said, oh, okay,
great soundbite.
No. And as you know, my buddy's not there, right? But my thing is, we have to make sure that the past is remembered in all of its texture and complexity.
Yes.
That's what gets me when I hear the word monument. That's what, this whole thing about, like, people say, today you must feel pretty good about, I know, because I do this, because I hear people talk and I just want to like squeeze my head, like stop thinking, because I got to go back to how I learned language and communication. And monument did not ask to become anything other than forewarning, remembering, and advising our present about what the past was.
Wow. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. This is this thing that removing does not erase. Right? This is one thing. It's this one thing, like when you use a pencil and you use an eraser, that it really doesn't necessarily go completely away, because the pressure of the hand makes an indentation in that paper that stays there.
Yeah.
Regardless of you erasing, you using this eraser. So like, yeah, you brought up the point to remove a lot of things that's necessarily erase the thing. And then it's just as important to understand all of the history, right? So the important thing is that we rethink who we make monuments for, right?
Who's receiving that story? Yes.
Right. This season on Breaking Bread. How do we tell truth through our art in these times?
It is like the ultimate monument, which is in the minds of people.
We have a lot of monuments in Chicago, and people, probably kids, don't know exactly who they are, and we see them everywhere.
It was our family photos and art pieces that we had our stories embedded in.